Hi everybody! In this video we will see how to create the PowerApps application by using SharePoint Online as our data source. We will see the different functions and operations that are delegable to SharePoint Online and some workarounds we can use. So let's start with this video. Okay, so let's explore our application. This Canvas app application uses SharePoint Online as a data source. If we go to the data source section, you will see all my SharePoint lists. Before going into the details of this PowerApps application, let's go to the SharePoint Online site. So this is my SharePoint site, and in this SharePoint site I have different lists. For example, if I go to course category, you will see all the different categories, the languages, the level, modality, professor, and the courses, right? I have some records here. I'm using lookup columns to show the information from other SharePoint Online lists. Excellent. So what I did is basically I added the connection to those lists, and here we are. Now, it's important to understand that from all of the different data sources that we have explored until now, SharePoint Online is the one who has more restrictions in terms of delegation. There are a lot of functions that are not delegable to SharePoint Online. Actually, if we review the documentation, you will see that we won't have, for example, expressions like in or functions like search that are relevant to a lot of the functionality that we have created. Some of the great things that SharePoint Online has is that we can filter by a lot of the different data types of columns. So let's review basically the delegation warnings that we have. So in this home screen, we have our table as well, right? In this case, basically, we have connected our table to the courses list. And if we look at the combo boxes, you will see that basically in these combo boxes we have specified the name of the SharePoint list to show the values, right? Remember that we need to select the item, but also in the configurations, right? We need to specify this. If we go to advanced, in display fields, we need to specify which field to show from that particular list, as well as in the search fields. Perfect. Okay, now if we explore the filter, and if we go here, you will see that the filter or the functions that we are using are very similar to the ones that we use in Dataverse for Teams, in Dataverse, and in SQL. Actually, we just copied the same functionality, and the only thing that we change is the name, for example. Then in this case, the source is the name of the SharePoint list, the course SharePoint list, and here we need to obviously specify the name of the field in that particular SharePoint list and the value that we want to get. Remember that those fields are lookup fields, and lookup fields allow us to get information from other related lists, right? So for example, in this case, we get the value from the course category lookup field, and for the course category list specifically, right? So the great news is that most of the filters basically are delegable to SharePoint Online. You see that we don't have issues here, right? However, we face an issue, or we had a warning here, particularly in this expression. In is not delegable to SharePoint Online. So if we go to basically to the functionality, if we review the functionality, the only control that won't work is this one. We won't be able to basically filter by course name, at least not by using this particular evaluation in. We can use other functions. If we, for example, explore other alternatives, we can use start with, but we can use in, right? So that's basically a limitation that we will have. If we go to basically, if we want to use other expressions like or other functions like max, min, average, or sum, these are delegable. Those are going to work without any problem. Now remember that the restriction of the delegation here is that if our SharePoint list has more than 2,000 items, we won't be able to get or execute the query in the backend. We will need to execute the query in the front end, and obviously there is going to be limitations there because we will get the first 2,000 items, right? So we won't be able to search or filter the values for the item 2001 or the item 2010, for example. If we go to the numeric filters screen, Great news here is that all the functions and filters basically and operations are delegable to SharePoint Online, so we don't have delegation warnings. The expressions, the filters and evaluations are the same. If we go to date filters, it's going to work as well, right? That's another great capability that we have here. Let me just filter to show you how it works. The filter expression is the same, and this is because if we go again to the documentation, datetime data types are allowed or are delegable to SharePoint Online. Now, if we go to search function, we know that search is not delegable. So this is not going to work. Search is not going to work. Actually, it's going to work. Again, remember that delegation means that if we are executing or using a function that is not delegable, that means that PowerApps will need to execute the processing in the front end. So we are limited to up to 500 items or up to 2000 items depending on the configuration that we did in our application. So this is gonna work because obviously here I have just a few items. Actually, if I try to execute this query, it's gonna work, right? Let me put, for example, .NET. Yeah, and it's getting results because we have less than 500 items. Yeah? We have just few items, so the processing can be done in the front end here. But if we have more items, obviously we won't be able to get all the items that are needed. And also you could face some performance issues because you are processing a lot of items in the front end. So imagine that you want to access to this application from the mobile, from your smartphone, for example. Obviously you will need to process 2000 items from your smartphone, so it could have some performance issues and not the best user experience. So if possible, try to use only delegable functions. Another important thing to know is that SharePoint Online also has their own limitations. So even if you use delegable functions, right? Even if you use just specific filters that are delegable to SharePoint Online can process up to 5,000 items at the same time, right? So it's important as well to don't have performance issues with SharePoint to use indices. To configure indices, basically you go to your SharePoint list, you click on list settings, and here if you go to the columns section, there is this section index columns, and here you can create a new index. Remember that you can create up to 20 indices. So if you're gonna basically apply filter by multiple fields, for example in this particular case, if you're gonna filter by language, professor, category, modality, level, etc. Those fields should be configured as indices of your SharePoint Online list. To do that, you just click here, create new index, and you can select, for example, course category, and you can create that index. Perfect. Now, let's go back to our search function, right? Some people, as an alternative of search, use filters, right? And actually, let me show you that. If I go to this particular screen, what I did is I used, you can use something like that. For example, if you want to search by multiple columns, right, or implement an alternative to the search function, you can use the filter function and you can use the start with. So in that way, you can filter by multiple text columns based on the text on a specific text box. However, something that I noticed is that this is not gonna work in some specific data types. For example, if you are using single line of text, it's gonna work. But if you're using a multi-line text field, this is not gonna work because multi-line text is not delegable. Actually, you will see here that description is a multi-line text field, and you can combine a multi-line text field with a filter function because it's not delegable. So that unfortunately is another limitation. But if you want to search for other text fields instead of a multi-line fields, that's an option that you can use as a workaround to avoiding using the search function. Now let's talk about text filters, right? Here we also will have some limitation, but not in all cases. If we select the table and if we open the filters, here you will see when we have delegation warnings. So for example, you can execute this validation. This is legal, this is gonna work. But when you want to use, for example, in, remember that this is not delegable. When you use not expressions, is not delegable. The start with is delegable, ends with is not delegable. Blank, So if you want to validate if your field is empty or is blank, basically, this is delegable, it's gonna work. But if it's not blank, it's not gonna work because we are using the not expression. Okay, so try to avoid again this non-delegable function. And finally, if we go to the operator example, operators are also not delegable, but this is the same case as in Dataverse for Teams and in Dataverse. So it's probably this is not the most relevant scenario, but because there are workarounds, you can create your calculated columns or do this type of filters in a different way. Okay, so in summary, SharePoint Online has been widely used, and this is because first of all, it's easy to create. You can easily create SharePoint lists and easily create an application using SharePoint Online as a data source. Is basically if you have a Microsoft 365 license, it's included. You don't need to pay for a premium license here, right? And a lot of the traditional SharePoint developers or people that have previously created or automated processes using technologies like InfoPath or creating or automating workflows using the workflow technology available in SharePoint, for them it's easier to basically upgrade those types of applications using PowerApps and Power Automate. So SharePoint is a good option, however, for specific scenarios. It's a good option if you are building, you want to quickly build a solution, you will have a application that won't store more than 2,000 items. Usually citizen developers can easily create applications. However, it's better to analyze alternatives to SharePoint Online as Dataverse for Teams. For example, Dataverse for Teams has better security capabilities. In terms of delegation, is much better than SharePoint Online, as you can see in this particular example. You can upgrade your Dataverse application to a Dataverse full version. So maybe it's easier to upgrade a Dataverse for Teams application to Dataverse instead of basically modify your PowerApps application that uses SharePoint as a data source to later support Dataverse, right? You probably will need to do more changes. So it's still a good alternative. Is a better alternative than storing the information in an Excel file, for example, obviously. However, also it's important to evaluate other considerations, right? For example, if you create a PowerApps Canvas apps that uses SharePoint Online, you can do things like embedding your PowerApps in a SharePoint Online site. Maybe that's a requirement, and you can do that with Dataverse for Teams. Or you can also embed your app in Power BI, in a Power BI report. That's something that you can do with a PowerApps for Teams application, right? So you obviously will need to evaluate your requirements to understand their limitations as well, right? Probably the requirements or the functionality that you need to implement don't require to use non-delegable functions, so this is a good alternative and quick alternative to create your app. Okay, I hope you enjoyed this video and all of this content. I will be creating more content, so please let me know in the comments what would you like to see in upcoming videos. Bye.